Hey guys, this is video one of a documented build that I'm getting ready to start. This is for a Corsair 25. It's a early 90s, really nice boat. This is when I met the client, he was under the impression this was a Gen 5, but after a little bit of research and digging into it, it is a Gen 6, or it is a crate motor that's built out as a Gen 6. Now, this being video one, there's gonna be a lot of videos related to this build, mainly to help the client because he's a good distance away from the shop, and it would be really difficult for him to drive down every other day when I need to show him something. So going to be a lot of videos here. The reason I wanted to start out with this video is I just got the intake off of it, but I wanted to document how I start the build process. First thing I do before I put it on the engine stand is I thoroughly clean everything up in here and assess the whole back end, because once you get mounted on this stand and you start getting into the build process, before machining, in other words the disassembly, I want it as clean as possible. And when you see this intake a little while ago, you'll see, well, that's an indication of how much rust there was. But where I'm going with this video is I've got it fairly cleaned up and ready to start disassembling. I finally got the intake off, but what I discovered was, man, it was kind of crazy. Now the client and I, we were both aware that there's either leak. Well, yeah, you can obviously see that water. I mean, I literally just pulled the intake off. That'll be where are we? That's going to be 2468. So that's intake number 2, full of water. Number 4. Rusty. I haven't even really looked through this. I just grabbed the camera. 6, 8. 6 has got a little bit of rust. 8. There's some rust on the valve in number 7. 5. Well, I think the whole engine was running on number 5. It looks pretty good. And there's your typical cylinder 1 and cylinder 3. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what's going on here, other than just I wanted to get the documentation started. It's a really clean block, even though it was raw water cooled. We're going to convert it to a closed cooled system, and the client's already got his heat exchanger 4 to 454, and I think we're both pretty excited about this build. I won't go into detail with the specs at all right now, but it's definitely going to be high performance, and it's going to be pretty cool. Okay, here, this is something I wanted to document, which was, and where I'm going with this is, I'm beginning to see this pattern here in South Florida, where these sport boats, the hatches are leaking profusely. Let's see if I can get this in here. Oh, hell. See the heads of the bolts? Well, there are no heads. And where I'm going with this engine was replaced, I believe, in 2007 or 9, I can't remember. But basically the whole top end is just, pooling, catching all this rainwater, and look where it's going. It's what's destroying these engines. So, in general, I think the clients should really start, considering, how their hatches are draining and such. So anyway, it's in fairly good, it's clean. Otherwise, other than the obvious cylinders, the intake runners that were rusty up there. I'm not going to go into detail down here, but we're not going to reuse this. We're going to be using a high performance aluminum, and we'll go from there. Okay, oil. I just drained the oil off. There was about probably 2 cups of water in it. I think it's probably just from the rain. The oil, it's a little brown, so I don't know if maybe when he ran it last that it finally started mixing a little bit, but I don't believe he ran it very long that way. So anyway, I'm going to shut the video down there, I believe. Yeah, we won't get into the exhaust there, but this is a good indicator of what I'm about to get into. This is going to be a nightmare. to get this off, or just it's going to take a real slow a long time to get it all apart. And speaking of that, time wise, typically you could knock an engine apart in 2 to 3 hours. I think I'm already about 10 hours in this engine. I'm not complaining, I'm just making note of that when you build an engine, you need to really take your time when you're pulling it apart. And I mean, look at that. Surprisingly, it's not going to be that difficult to get loose, but it's sure as hell isn't going to come off within 15 seconds. It's going to take a long time. Why? Because these are number 279 heads. These are the 100cc Vortec heads. These are not the number 152, I believe it is, the 118cc. So it makes sense to take a lot of time to get this old exhaust manifold off properly, and not just tear this head apart and cause the client to have to spend more money. So there's no sense in that, because otherwise I think this head's going to be fine. I had one of the valve, I had this rocker cover loose. I put it back because I didn't want any debris getting in it when I was cleaning, but I have seen in the inside and it looks really good. So I'm going to end it there. Nothing else to talk about, but again, this is video 1, and this is a good indicator of, okay, that plug took about, I don't know, 30 minutes to get loose. And the way I did it, typically you just do a little bit of heat to expand that, but it just wasn't turning loose. And even when I was taking a chisel and popping it, to try to get it to break loose. And this is something that's really interesting, because my dad was a welding instructor, and I used to watch him, heat up anything just briefly, and then boom, he'd knock the bolt out, or it would come out fairly easily. But one thing I've noticed about some of these plugs in these engines, they're real difficult to get out. And sometimes, where I'm going with this, just spray a little WD-40 around them, and then take your torch, like your I don't have my little map gas torch here, but just cook that baby. I mean, just cook it until you see it bubbling up here. And then I think what it is because there's a little bit of sealant on these threads. Don't worry about heating it up so much that the plug expands with the block as well. Just heat that baby up, and it'll come right out. And that's exactly what I did here. So because I was not able to get that out on the first pass, but after I put the torch to it and just really until it started bubbling at the top, was I able to get it out. So it's going to be a great build, and I'll keep you guys posted. And I guess that's it. Thanks for looking.